she was 82, and she was a vibrant, kind of a wild personality, but her body was really kind of weak and broken down. She hadn't worked out at all. She could walk, but she was kind of frail. And it was a big traveler. And her goal before she died, she wanted to go to all 7 continents, and she had 2 left, Australia and Antarctica. So she said, I want to go to Australia and scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef.
Welcome, friends. Good to be with you again. My guest on the show today is Janet McConnell. Janet's story is similar to many people in terms of midlife, found herself wondering who she was. How did she get to be this person that she didn't really recognize anymore? And what was she going to do about it? Well, she did something about it. She did a lot about it, actually. She really transformed herself, and what we see happen with many people who go through a significant transformation is they then turn around and realize that they can help transform others, help lift others up. And I think you'll find Janet's story very uplifting, but also very informative. And the stories that she tells are quite interesting, and I think you'll find a lot of learnings as we go through here too. So with that, let's get on with the show. Janet, great to have you on the WealthSpan podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to talk about kind of fitness and health and the idea of things you can do as you get too old to do stuff, but apparently maybe not. I think we're gonna break a few rules today, maybe even.
Yeah, that's what I'm into. I believe in breaking the rules of aging. That's one of the reasons I'm on the earth.
Well, I think we have that in common, because I don't break rules just for the sake of breaking rules, but I think, society kind of wants to pen us in and put some labels on us, and that really we don't need to. And I think that's a lot of what you and I have in common, and probably why we're sitting here talking today, is this notion of there's a lot more opportunity out there than people tend to kind of fall into patterns and essentially limit what their options and their capabilities are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what the mind hears and believes, it just plays out. And so it's really important to monitor and question beliefs on a regular basis to make sure they're in alignment with reality.
So you had a bit of a coming to reality, I'll call it.
Yeah.
Midlife. And so I think all of us have been through some stages, right? Of kind of things happen in the course of life. You kind of go along and then find yourself am I going in the right direction, or what the hell just happened to me? So kind of maybe take us to that point in life where you kind of realized maybe from where you'd come from to where you were not in alignment with where you're wanting to go.
Yes, I think there was a point in my mid 40s where my reality was not matching up with what I thought was going on. And that was a rude awakening. At the time, as I was about 46 when this happened, I was working in corporate life, busy, very demanding job, but very rewarding. And I loved it. I felt like I was serving my clients, and I felt productive and successful and all those things. But I was really burning the candle at both ends and not serving myself, not taking care of myself. And I think there is this. I know that comedian Bill Burr, his latest special is about this. This is a little bit of a departure, but it makes sense. He calls the ages between 40, 45, and 61 as the drop dead years. And he says it's really only true for men. Women don't drop dead. Men drop dead. And
Yeah.
if they survive to 61, then they'll just have a disease or something later on. Of course, he's being Bill Burr, but I think there's something to that there is stuff that sneaks up on us because maybe if we grew up healthy. I grew up very healthy and strong, vibrant, very robust, healthy person, and thought that's just the way you exist. I didn't really have to work on it. It kind of came with youth and vitality. But Guess what? No, does not happen. And I was really coming apart at the seams very slowly, kind of under the radar. And the only thing I felt was I was tired, getting a little bit of brain fog, getting run down, that kind of thing with, flight schedules. I was traveling all the time and presenting and public speaking. So I didn't know that I was such a mess, but I found myself in my doctor's office and had my annual physical, as I dutifully did every year. But this time it was different. And he ushered me into his office because he was going to have a serious conversation with me. And that was that my blood work came back with everything in the red zone. Um, I mean, it was blood pressure, triglycerides, cholesterol, everything really bad. And I was borderline obese, which I didn't, I'm tall, so I carry weight really well. And so people said, no, you're proportioned. I was fat. So
Yeah, yeah,
according to everybody was just being too nice. So yeah, it was time to rein it in. And he basically told what he told me that scared me was he said, you have early stage heart disease. And I was 46. You don't get that when you're 46. I mean, I just kept thinking, I'm too young to be this old, and it scared me. And he wanted to start out, of course, with a stack of prescriptions because that's medicine 2.0, as Dr. Peter Attia calls it, where we treat things after the fact. We don't dabble in prevention. And so I just kind of had I don't know, kind of a moment of brain explosion when I saw those prescription slips and thought, oh no, we haven't even gotten anything into what the body can do if I just give it a chance. And so I bargained with him. He knew me pretty well, so I could get away with it. But I just said, listen, give me 6 months. And he's like, oh, here we go.
yeah,
Everybody's always bargaining for salvation here. And so I told him, I said, I'll come back in 6 months. Let's make the appointment right now and just let me work on this. And he said, well, I'm going to keep these prescriptions because I think, you're still going to need them. But everybody says they're going to do something and they never do. It's like, nah, you wait. It's always great when someone tells me I can't do something. It's a gift, really, because then I'm definitely going to do
yeah.
it.
For some of us, that's a real motivator, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 So before you go further,
Right.
I think it's a really interesting point to make here. Partly the point in life. So I'll say at 46, I can point to far too many people who I know by that age drop dead of a heart attack. And that's kind of what Bill Burrow's getting at is
Yeah.
that there's no warning. You just have
Right.
the heart attack and die.
Right.
Um, and so in some respects, it's lucky that you kind of had it wasn't that fast occurring.
Right.
But what you talk about, as I think a lot of us look around, right? We see it around us. There's that there's always been kind of the middle age creep, but I
Hmm.
think that's what's changed over the last couple of decades is the creep is creeping faster, but it's still not fast enough to really notice, when you're looking at clothing, because we adjust our clothing based on our body type. And so we make all these minor adjustments, but over a decade and 2 decades, it starts to catch up. I had the same thing happen to me when I was early 40s. I didn't even have the doctor. I could tell by the symptoms of how my energy when I was doing work with everyone else who were athletic, and I'm thinking, hang on, I'm doing all this with a bunch of other people who are super fit, semi-pro athletes, and I'm just sacrificing all of me for them. I love being around them,
Sure.
and yeah, so it was I think we have that kind of coming to reality moment whenever it comes, but when it comes, that's a decision point, right? So that's where you're at. And a lot
Hmm.
of people don't have the courage or they don't understand what's involved. It's too intimidating. It's too challenging. They don't know where to turn next. They don't have a support around them. And they just kind of say, oh, well, and rationalize it. This is just part of aging. So you can challenge me, but I'll say, no, that's not part of aging. Yes, a little bit of weight is absolutely no problem and even potentially protective, but
Right.
a little bit is different than this creep that you're getting in your 40s that's already significant. So let's not confuse the two
Yeah.
when we're talking about it with folks. But okay, so Labs, I'm a big advocate of measuring all sorts of things, almost anything but the weight scale. Right? That's kind of about one of the most irrelevant. It's convenient, but it's not particularly relevant. There's a
Right.
lot better metrics to use than what you weigh on the scale, right?
Yes,
We're going to talk
absolutely.
about that, I think, when we get forward a little bit. But
Sure.
so, okay, so you're at this moment of, okay, give me 6 months and let's see. So 24 hours and you're right back to it, right?
I, in all transparency, I did not have a strategy. I was at that time, I mean, the health that I had had when I was in my teens and 20s was free because I have good genetics and I had a very active life, very athletic. So it just kind of happened. I never really like strategically, oh, well, I've got to lose weight and I've got to get in shape. Never. And so to me, it was like, well, I don't know. I have to do something. It's my word. But if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. So now, now what? So after a good hysterical cry, pounding on the steering wheel, I pulled myself together and and then went back to work that afternoon and I talked to my boss about it and just said, I don't know what to do. And um, I don't want to cut back on my travel schedule. I want to do everything. But she said, well, you can exercise at the hotels where you are. And I have a trainer, Janet. He's really good. I think you'd like him. Why don't you give him a call? Here's his number. I thought, fine. Well, he was really good. And in fact, the only opening he had was at 5 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Ouch.
Great. It was really pushing my buttons.
That'll test commitment early.
Yeah. Oh, you want it? Let's see how much you want it. That's what the universe was saying. So I thought, right. I mean, I'm kind of a morning person, but not that much of a morning person. So I became more of a morning person. I took him up on it because I thought, well, at least that way I won't, if I work out in the evening after work, there'll be more things in the way. I'll be tired. I'll be more likely to cancel. Somebody will have a last minute emergency meeting about some client that's freaking out, and I have to cancel my plans. And so this is better. So there I was with my little trainer, and he happened to be a bodybuilding resistance training discipline rather than CrossFit or many of the other things out there. It just happened that way. And it turned out I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved the feeling of strength and challenge, and I loved seeing the heavier and heavier, and it was very rewarding. It was a big dopamine rush for me just to see that very quickly. I mean, in the course of 3 or 4 weeks, I was already getting stronger, and that's fine. That's very acceptable. So yeah, I didn't focus on diet at all. I just kept eating all the garbage that I had been eating all along, and but I worked out like a crazy person. I loved it.
So how many times a week were you going to the gym when you started out?
3 times a week. And it was
Right.
just, picking the heavy things up, putting heavy things down, cables, dumbbells, barbells, machines. But because I had a trainer, he was strategic and he knew how to build muscle, in a way that sort of like a rotisserie where you're just nicely browned on all sides.
Right.
So it
Right.
wasn't overtraining any one thing.
It's not like just working on biceps, right? Which you kind of see a
Right.
lot of people just get hyper focused on. Well, what's sticking out of my shirt?
Yeah. Yeah, it's got to be yeah, no friends don't let friends skip leg day. So we did plenty of that too. So it was really satisfying and fun and I felt it gave me a feeling of some when I really was getting stronger, I would finish like a really heavy leg press and I would get up and I'd think nothing else I do today is going to be this hard. All the, difficult conversations or phone calls or client meetings, nothing will be this hard. So it gave me this air of confidence and self-efficacy that I had kind of lost a little bit. It was great. So I was on a high. Um,
So tell me about that one because I'm a leg press fan too.
yeah,
So what was it about the leg press that kind of really clicked for you?
I think that it's leg press and then bar squatting. Those were the two gnarliest
Yep.
things that I did. I think there's something that triggers in your brain. I don't know if it's the amygdala or what, but when you get ready to do your move, there is a feeling of imminent danger. Like
Yep.
this could kill me. if I don't do this.
Because you're working with big weights.
Yes,
Like
big weights.
I think
And
that's the difference for me is relative to everything else you do.
yeah,
These are the heaviest things. Well, maybe a deadlift, but yeah,
yes.
because you're working the big leg muscles, right?
Yeah, your biggest muscles. So it's kind of like a V8 engine where it sucks more air. It's got to have more gas. And so it really taxes your nervous system and your cardiovascular system because those muscles are so big, they demand, it's just like the gas hog that a V8 engine is. It takes everything, it just sucks it down. So it was really great for my nervous system and also taught me that it's even though it's heavy, I was protected because my trainer taught me how to do everything properly and we didn't overdo anything. And but there was this feeling of imminent danger, and then I would achieve it. And I'm like, wow, I guess who's dangerous now? It
Well,
gives
and
you,
that's kind of where I was going with it because I
yeah,
think particularly for women that get interested in it, the story you told of how you got to that point is really common. And I think all
mhm,
the things about bodybuilding get lost on a lot of people
right,
versus which are the things that happen that, and particularly I think where women they identify with strength and power like this is something I didn't know was in me because there's nothing in life that would prepare you for what that is and then
right.
you say in 3 weeks I'm doing even more.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
okay, bring it, right? So I think those are really pivotal moments. And you try to, like, when you try to encourage people to do strength training, that's where you want to get them that far. And
right.
if you can get them that far,
You're hooked. It's
it's
like
easy, right?
you
Everything
want
after
that
that
feeling.
gets easy. Yeah.
Yeah, you want that feeling. I even had a client last year who had just started with me, and it was a 72-year-old woman and not overweight, maybe just a little pot belly, but looking good and just determined to get stronger. And she wanted to learn to do bar squatting. And so we practiced all the forms leading up to it until the day came when she had all the little pieces put together so that she could do the bar safely. And she did one set and she finished and we racked it and she turned around and she said, that felt great.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She'd never felt that before. And it was like, oh no, a monster's been born. There's no going back. I just laughed so hard because she was so like spontaneous, like, oh, I've never felt that before. It was really
Yeah,
good.
that's awesome. And that's what I'm about. Like, and I just see so many places where we don't come anywhere near tapping into our capabilities. So a great example.
Yeah. And with body strength like that for women, I think women are genetically as a gender are stronger on lower body and then on upper body, and men tend to be more upper body. As a rule, there's plenty of exceptions. But when a woman is able to use her legs that way, it's really not that hard in a way because we're kind of wired. Those thigh muscles and those hip muscles, the glutes for childbearing, it's just all, genetically worked in for that. So it's there. It just needs to be trained and activated. And then, of course, the problem with women too is like, the little bingo wings, we call them. Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
and then they start doing triceps and then they have little shoulders and then they look really good in a tank top and they're just like, oh, this is great. So they never get huge, big, bulky muscles because they don't have the right mix of hormones and the right amount of hormones to make that happen.
Hmm.
They just get firmer and then a little bit of fat comes off and then they have this nice sculpted look.
Yeah. No, that's okay. So you started bodybuilding, got that's why sorry I cut you off there three
Oh,
weeks in or so,
yeah.
and but you're still kind of sounds like you had a ways to go yet.
Yes.
That
I
was step one.
That was step one. So, yeah, no change in diet. So I think, and the reason I tell people this is because you don't have to do everything all at once. And sometimes that's kind of ends up having a negative outcome because you take on too much. So just start with one thing and get that good. And don't focus on the perfection and the end product that you want. Just focus on starting the habits and pick if you want to start with light exercises and then move into heavier. And then take a look at your food because what will happen is you will be hungry. And so that's your body saying, more protein, please, more complex carbs, please. More fiber. I need those things. You're asking me to do a job here. I need the fuel. So you
Right. And
start.
so maybe that's a kind of good point to add is that one of the
Mhm.
real benefits of why weight training or resistance training helps take fat off is because it's burning the whole time
More.
while the muscle's rebuilding.
Yeah. Muscles burn so many more calories than fat. So it's a really great way to passively lose weight, lose fat, because once you change the ratio of how much fat and muscle you have, and you have more muscle, you might weigh a couple more pounds on the scale, and that may think, oh, well, I'm doing all this work. Well, you put on muscle. But now, as you keep eating in a healthful way, your muscles will chew through a lot of those calories. You get a lot of forgiveness.
Right. And the
Yeah.
density of muscle is much higher than fat. So I say it's another example of why the scale on the floor isn't particularly helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one day I was in the gym with one of my clients and my trainer came up to me and we were talking. I said, I gained 2 pounds. And he goes, Yay. And I was like, why is that good? Well, because my fat stayed the same,
Yeah.
but muscles came in. Yeah.
So what came next for you?
So next, okay, so the 6 months went by, and I went back to my doctor and had the blood tests again, and I was like, oh, please, because I really didn't know. I didn't measure in between. I just went for it. I had lost 30 pounds. That's how much I wasn't moving. I mean, just moving. The only movement I got was running down the concourse with a wheelie bag. That was it. So, taking the stairs, I would do that. That's not enough. So, yeah, lost 30 pounds, but I still needed to see the blood work, and everything was in the safe range. And my doctor was like, I don't know. He was not sure he could trust me. So he said, I don't want you to quit. So you're going to come back in 6 more months. And I was like, fine. I'll have more to brag about. So I was, getting kind of like a little bit arrogant at that point, maybe, but um, I was really happy. And I was still a little bit fluffy, for sure. I mean, now I was becoming more self-conscious of my body because I was working with it so much that I could start to analyze it without being judgmental. Not like, oh, look at your thighs. It was more like, there's a little jiggle there, but it's better. I wonder if I do this. So I looked at my body as a project, like a science project, rather than, something to deride and poke fun at. So that was positive too for a female mindset to love your body and to respect it and to look at it as a project rather than, well, I'm just, I look terrible and I might as well just give up. So,
Yeah, and I think that's huge, right? Because what it's saying is you're taking ownership of your body, and
mhm.
that's not blaming. Some people think, ownership
No,
is blaming. No, it's
no,
and for if you look at I don't know who of us in the health span and longevity space that would be an exception. I can't think of anybody. We do experimentation on our body
lot.
because there's always this question of I wonder, like you're saying, but also we need the belief.
Yes,
We need to reinforce the belief that these things work because we all question everything all the
right.
time. And so as you start to do these on yourself, like I'll start doing an experiment or something, and it'll come from I don't know where. It'll just drop out of the sky and realize that's actually really interesting because I wonder if that would have the same influence on me. And I'm not talking about drugs. I'm talking about lifestyle habits, just or
Right.
the things that we do to occupy our time over the course of the days and weeks and see what that changes in time frames of like 90 days is probably about the minimum I would look at to see changes.
Yes.
You're seeing a
Fair.
difference in how you feel, like in
Yeah.
weight training, like you mentioned, after just a few weeks. As soon as
Yeah.
you start to feel it, you start to connect. And then by
Mhm.
the time you get to 90 days, there's things happening that you can quickly start to point to, again, that have very little to do with what that scale says on the floor, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you'd sort of you hear a lot of things like you get ideas about what to try, and not everything works for everybody.
Exactly.
So, like with dieting, you want to get your protein macros in, but then some people do better with more fat and less carb, or more carb and less fat, or medium for each. And so part of the process, even in a bodybuilding competition framework, is to experiment before you have to lean out and see which way your body wants to go. And you work with the way your body wants to metabolize. And you figure it out pretty quickly by just doing like 3 or 4 weeks one way and then measure, then do 3 or 4 weeks another way, measure. And then you can see which one is really for you and how you feel depending on what you're doing. So
Yeah. And what the person to your left and the person to your right are doing
yeah.
really don't matter, right? Because a totally different set of genes, even within a family, we see
Yeah.
significant difference in how people respond to different activities.
Right. So I'm always cautious, and I want your viewers to always be cautious when someone says, the only way to go is vegan. The only way to go is CrossFit. The only way to go is Orange Theory. The only way to go is carnivore. They're all fine for some reason, and they all work for someone, but you have to find out what
Yeah.
is yours.
Yeah. Those are red flags when you hear somebody trying to wave that in front of you. Great that
Hmm.
it works for them. And
Hmm.
even if it works for them, doesn't mean it works for them long term,
Right.
right? Because that's ultimately
Absolutely.
where we're going with this is in the short term, you can start to figure out your body, but
Yeah.
ultimately we're here to play the long game, right?
Yeah, and you have permission to claim what works for you and stand up for yourself on that and just say, that's great. I'm so glad you found what works for you. I was there. I'm so glad you found what works for you. And people will be like, oh. So
Yeah,
it's kind of a
yeah,
way to change the narrative. Like what I'm saying is that doesn't work for me, and I know what works for me.
right. Yeah. No, that's really important to kind of keep reminding ourselves of that as we go through life, right? Because
Yes.
even in normal living, things will
Yes.
change over the course of years. So,
Yeah.
okay, so your numbers are good. What next?
Yes. Yeah.
Because
So
you're a
I
project.
I looked at myself that way. I'm a daughter of a scientist, so I think I sort of always had that idea of comfort with that because everything for him was let's see, let's try this out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
uh, so I went back to the gym and I just thought, well, I dodged that bullet. That's great, and I had fun doing it. So, but and it was definitely a part of my lifestyle. So I knew I was not going to quit. I knew that I was going to keep doing this. However, I realized I didn't have a new goal. And I really, my goal had been achieved. I made it to the doctor's appointment and didn't have to take home a bunch of prescriptions. And so now what? And so I was kind of musing about that. And right about that time, these two ladies showed up in the gym at 5 a.m., Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with another trainer that was there at the same time, right nearby. I mean, they were working in a section near us. And so I could kind of keep my eye on them. And so I was watching what they did. And the reason my eye was captured is because they looked incredible. I mean, Scott, when I tell you, they were sculpted, carved with washboard abs, and they were probably about, I don't know, 5 to 7 years younger than me. So,
So
it
they're
wasn't,
not kids in their 20s.
no, they were adult, middle-aged women like me. Um, and so I was just like, oh, I would love to look like that. Oh, they must be so strong. They must work out so hard. And then I noticed they were lifting the same weights I was lifting. They were curling the same dumbbells. They were pushing the same barbells. They were doing the same leg press weights. And I was like, wait a minute. And I asked my trainer, we're doing the same work and they look like that. And I look like this. What's going on? He said, oh, those two. Okay. He goes, Janet, those are bodybuilding competitors and they are on their last sprint to the stage. So they're going to be on stage in 5 weeks. So they're here doing their refining and staying conditioned. And at the same time, they're doing a very strategic diet. And what's different about the diet is you have to diet in a way that makes fat come off, but not muscle. So the muscle has to stay. You don't want to burn off everything you just spent years building. So you have to eat. So clearly, starvation isn't going to work here because a starvation diet to lose weight is going to mean that the fat and the muscle say
Right,
goodbye at the
right.
same time. And what a shame that would be So they have to diet strategically. I said, strategically, what do you mean? I said, do they just eat salads and like, no, Janet, that's not strategic at all. That's starvation or at least calorie deprivation. You have to eat enough total calories for your muscles to get the signal that they are supported. But you can only eat that and you don't want to eat anything extra. And what happens then is the fat starts to get the message to leave. You show it the door. So that's what they were doing. And I said, well, I want that diet. I'm working as hard as they are. I can look like that, right? And he's like, well, he was a little hesitant. And I think it was because I was a really good client. And he was worried that if I did this and I failed, I would get discouraged and quit. I think that's looking back. I believe that's what was going on. He didn't say that, but I think that's
Yeah,
what.
and you wouldn't know how everybody's going to respond, even if you did all the same things and followed all the same instruction, right?
Right. He knew all the pitfalls. So he said, well, Janet, I don't know. It's really hard. Nobody, you wouldn't like it, and everybody quits, you know. And I said, well, that's my green light right there. You telling me I can't do this? Come at me, bro. So he gave me the diet. We started working. We got, like a working diet with that we retooled a little bit as we went. But a year later, I was on my first bodybuilding stage at the age of 48. I was
Cool.
40 the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a I had no awareness of women's bodybuilding, growing up or over the years, and it is a I find it quite fascinating, and I think very different drivers probably than for men.
Yes.
Um, but
Yes.
but yeah, in terms of body awareness and
Yeah.
strength and health, clearly that is top of mind.
Yeah, it is. And it's really a sport where you not only have to be strong and strategic on how you train, but you have to eat right. Whereas power lifters, it's a different angle of bodybuilding and strength training. It's really strength training, but power lifters are only concerned with being really strong and having stamina. So they can eat large, and that's why they look huge. I mean, they look like grizzly bears, and they are really strong, but they are judged on what they lift. And if they've got little love handles, that's okay. It doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Yeah.
Whatever gets the job done. So it's a little different. And so, some bodybuilders move into that kind of strength training just because the discipline of lifting is much easier than the discipline of eating correctly.
Right.
So,
Right. Okay. Okay, so take us forward from there because you're just continuing moving down this road.
right. Well, that when I made it to that stage that first time, and at that time it was a regional contest. The MC read my bio that I had provided, just some little simple paragraph. And then I came out and I posed. And because part of what I said in my bio was that I had lost 50 pounds, because by then, from the beginning, it was 50 total. I had lost 50 pounds and I was 48 years old. And this was my first time on stage. I was a novice. The crowd went wild. It's really a rowdy crowd anyway, but people were on their feet, banging on the seats. They were just, and I was just like completely blown away. I mean, I remember the impact of the sound, that explosive sound of their applause just hitting me in the sternum. Just it was like a concussion in right here. And I just was, I want more of this.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it's affirmation, right? In a
yes,
from a bunch of
yes.
strangers who recognize your journey instantly.
They had no reason investment in me at all, personally. So it was just more like this recognition in the crowd that I had done something unusual and brave. And so that was a great moment. And I rode on that fuel for a long time. I didn't get back on the stage again until I was 52. So there was some time in there. I was building my career. Well, here's what happened actually. This is important. This transformation was so fundamental for me in what it meant in my life and what it did for my self-esteem and confidence that I thought, this is the way I can really affect people's lives. What I was doing in my corporate job was to some degree, but this is so much more powerful. I want to do this. I want my clients to experience this or something like that. It didn't have to be on the stage, but a transformation and what
Right,
that
right.
means. So this idea hatched in my head that what I really wanted to do was get my certification to be a trainer and build up some clientele and then move and then quit my corporate job and do that full time. And so that's what I did. So I became a full-time trainer and started with no clients and built a business from there, being able to, get referrals. And so it was an entrepreneurial journey as well as a personal journey of transformation. And so I think the way I looked and my motivation and my passion and my excitement was one of my main drivers for attracting clients. Both men and women wanted to train with me. And because I was older, I attracted middle age and senior clients because they wanted somebody who was their age, who understood what it was like to be 50, who understood what it was like to be not 25 anymore. And that, we weren't just going to run around the gym outside the gym and run up and down stairs to stay in shape. We were actually going to be very thoughtful and mindful and strategic about how we build that body. And they love that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it changed my life.
And as you're describing it, I'm thinking that maybe a way to explain this is what happens when you become body aware and feel like you're empowered as a result.
Yes,
It draws on confidence you didn't know that you had. Like the transformation, people focus on the physical transformation in terms of visually.
it's here.
That to me is not, yeah, that's easy to measure, but this is the other part I think that people overlook. They have no idea of what, kind of going back to what I said earlier around their capabilities, but also what that means in terms of self-confidence. So you've been at it now for what was your first when you started? What age?
It was okay, well, it was 2004, and then my most recent one was a couple of years ago. And so it's been over 20, 25 years.
Right. But even in those first few years, the change that happened, but you had enough
Yeah.
behind you. This wasn't
Yeah.
just a passing thing, right? That
Yes.
now allowed you or gave you the courage to now take on something that, you could, or someone could argue you had no right to do that. You,
Yeah,
you,
I would have
you had
never done.
no history and upbringing to do, well, you had your athletic history when you were young,
Yeah.
which you,
Yes.
so you tap back into that in some form, probably as you went through it, right?
Yes, and then personally, what I did for myself to keep myself motivated is I kept joining harder contests. So at the end, the last time I'm gonna go again next year when I'm 70. But I did this thing where
Right. That was 70. She just said people 70, 70.
I have all of the age spots to prove it. I earned those age spots. But I can remember thinking, what what would it be like if when women would say to me, "Oh, I don't know how you can," because leading up to a show, I would even stop drinking alcohol. I would go on the wagon for 4 to 6 months because it's much easier to get the rest of that little fat off, and it makes your skin tighter, especially as you get older. You get that crepey skin. Well, that goes away if you stop drinking. But I would do that and they go, I don't know how you can sacrifice that. And I said, if you had any inkling of how good it feels to live in my body, you wouldn't think twice about it. You would just do it. But that's the thing. It was hard to translate this amazing way that I felt. I felt so alive and still feel, I'm talking about the past, but I still feel so alive that why would you deny yourself of that? Now, when I'm not in training, I'll have a libation here and there. I do like to indulge. I do like to have birthday cake. But when it's game on. Whoa.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
game on isn't just showing up for the yeah when the doors open, right? It's that's
right.
part of the fun. That's what I like about endurance sport. Like it's
Yes,
game on for months leading up to it, and you
yes,
better enjoy that part because the actual time that you're performing is relatively small.
yeah,
And you just hope
yes,
to be able, you're healthy and you can show up and do it, but the journey there is pretty good. So you started no clients. Clearly, probably has some client stories that you can share with us of what that experience was like.
yes. I've had hundreds and hundreds of clients by now. And I've got lots of really good stories about what happens to people when they really take hold of their own, I don't know, their own legacy of what they want to create. And like, for example, this one woman, uh, she was not going to be with me long term. She was way too busy traveling and inconsistent. But what she really wanted, this was her, like her bucket list thing. When she turned 60, she wanted to be able to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Well, that is no small feat. And she was a casual hiker. She was in decent shape, but Kilimanjaro is that's a lot.
That's the real deal.
Yeah. So we just I told her, of course we can do that. Of course I can train you for that. And then I went home and looked up online
Well,
how to
what's a
train
Kilimanjaro?
where I knew where it was. I knew it was really big. But it was funny because that's kind of how I've conducted my life. I always just say, yeah, I can do that. And then I go home and figure out how to do it. So it's just a chance to learn something new.
Sure.
And there she was, after we trained for about 6 months. And part of it was sending her. I live in Arizona. So up in northern Arizona, we have some really good, like 12,000-foot peaks so that she could climb their trails and she could climb in high altitude and get acclimated. So she did that on her own. So she was very motivated, self-motivated. And then I did all the strength training with her in the gym so that she needed a stronger core that would help her with hiking and also with shouldering her pack, and she needed stronger upper body strength. Her legs were pretty strong already, but she needed stronger shoulders and arms. And so we worked a lot on that and then a little bit of legs. So she was ready. And then there's one other story. You want me to tell another one?
Sure.
I can tell this. I could tell you 100 stories, but the one that comes to mind, so I think that's the one I need to tell, is I trained a lady who was 82. And this is great because it flies in the face of, you know, what we think aging is, which I love to do. I love to shake that status quo up. So she was 82 and she was a vibrant, kind of a wild personality, but her body was really kind of weak and broken down. She hadn't worked out at all. She could walk, but she was kind of frail, and was a big traveler, and her goal before she died, she wanted to go to all 7 continents, and she had two left: Australia and Antarctica. So she said, I want to go to Australia and scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef.
Wow.
So what she did was she went and got certified. It's like, well, she's serious. She got certified, but it really bugged her. And the reason she hired me is that it really bugged her that all the young men on the trip would have to drag her oxygen tanks for her, because when they're on the deck, they're really heavy. You get in
Yeah.
the water, you have buoyancy. But she always had to, oh, young man, will you help me?
Right. Right. Right.
And she wanted to be like, I can do it myself. So she said, I want you to help me be strong enough. And that's both upper and lower body strength, right? So that
Yeah. Yeah. And on a boat that's rocking on the ocean. And yeah,
unstable.
just holding your balance, not
Yeah.
doing anything can be a challenge.
So we got real acquainted with sandbags. And she did it. She did it. We trained, I think, about 7 months or 7 or 8 months, that she luckily she came to me far enough in advance, because while it is true that when you're older you can do anything, the one thing that does change is it takes longer to ramp up, longer to warm up, and longer to recover. And so things grow a little bit more slowly, and so you need more lead time. which is why if you're listening to this and you are a senior, you need to start now because it's not going to get easier in 10 years. So she did the trip. I have pictures of her, with her mask and this beautiful blue water underneath. There's fish. She went to the Great Barrier Reef. And so she came home and she goes, okay, now Antarctica. And and of course with Antarctica, you have to be able to get go down a little the ladder onto the little launch because they have the cruise ship comes up and then you get on a floaty, one of those big inflatables
Oh,
that takes you up
okay,
shore,
like a Zodiac
like
dinghy.
a Zodiac. Yeah. That would take you to the shore, and then you have to be able to climb out of that. It's cold, it's wet, it's slippery. And then you have walking sticks because they would take them up on the glaciers.
Right.
They obviously weren't high elevation, but they were pretty steep and treacherous. You could fall, so she had to practice walking with walking sticks and on a slippery surface. So we had the sliders, where she could practice that.
Mhm.
And then also practicing throwing her leg up and over the side of the inflatable and climbing the rope ladder. I had like some little things that we could rig up where she could practice that motion and how to hold on, get a good grip. So she did that. And here she was 84 by then. And so she's been to all seven continents. And I wouldn't be surprised that she's strong enough to do them all again in rapid succession if she wanted to.
Those are, I just find that one in particular, so inspiring because, again, and I see it in master sport, in older age group sports. Um, and I try to kind of share what's going on with some of the record breaking things that are happening. And it's really just this people are saying, why not me?
Right.
Right? Why not me? I'm seeing other people do it like,
Yeah.
and it's,
Inspiring.
and the answer is usually yes. And so, and if you have the time and the passion, it's just a matter of putting in the plan, like all sorts of things, but you're planning for some hugely exciting event. Right?
Yes.
Which what else are you going to do with your kind of your senior years? Why
Thanks.
not plan for something exciting?
And it's so fun because you get kind of obsessed with it and it just fills you with the impetus to do it. You want to get up in the morning and get going because you love your goal and how cool it will be. And then the process of it isn't just like, ugh, I have to go to the gym again. It's like I've got to go because I want to do that, and so it becomes a lot more. I mean, you can get through life about going to the gym if you don't have some physical goal, but it's a lot harder.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and also just, if you don't have a big physical goal, show up at the gym, have a trainer, and they will take it from there. And so you will still get stronger. If you try to do it by yourself, I think it's a lot harder. Some people can, but
yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure. It's always going to be better having someone along. The question is more how much you need them. I think it's more than
yes,
whether it's a 0 or 1. It's more a question of what frequency. So
correct.
you work with people today. How does that work in terms of how do you work with people in Arizona locally or?
Yes, I only train locally and in person. I did try online training for a while, and I know there's some people are very successful and find it very satisfying. I have to be physically present. There's an energy thing, there's a focus thing, there's a physical cueing, there's the being able to see everything in the environment. Because with seniors, I mean, you got to people don't have time for downtime for injuries. So the last thing I ever do with clients, no injuries, no injuries. So, because we have too much to do and too little time.
Yeah, well,
So,
the older you get, the more you realize the clock's ticking down, and so
yes,
you don't want to be wasting time. That's
right.
certainly what I'm seeing.
Yep.
And you've got a book, Elements of Aging Well.
Yes, I do. So it looks like this. It's a quick read, and it is not just diet and exercise, which I started out writing. I thought, oh, well, I'll just,
Right.
Ray said, you should write an exercise book. Well, I started and I thought, what am I doing? There's 10,000 exercise and diet books out there. I mean, go get Jane Fonda's book if you really want to know.
Yeah, yeah,
But I thought, well, what do I really have to offer that is different than the person who just writes that? And it was the gift of age, being older and having a perspective on all the other things that come to bear when you embark on taking care of your body. How do you set boundaries if you're a people pleaser? How do you learn to do that? How do you teach an old dog new tricks, which we know isn't true now because of neuroplasticity? Yes, we can learn until our dying day. We have the ability to learn. So how to form new habits, kind of bouncing off of James Clear's Atomic Habits, but kind of my own flavor. And also how to um, how to face obstacles. How do you think about obstacles? There's lots written about that. Who's the Stoic writer? Shepherd, Ryan Shepherd. He's written many books, but there's one called The Obstacle is the Way, meaning if
yeah,
it's hard and if there's something in your way, you're going the right way. Because if you're going down easy street and you don't have any obstacles, that's a red flag.
yeah.
So,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. Yeah, those are where opportunities hiding, right? Just on the other side of the obstacle. And if you go around, you're likely to totally miss it.
Mhm.
No, I think that's brilliant. Janet, this has been wonderful. I love your energy. I love your focus. I love the message that you have around aging. I so share that. And that's to me is contagious, which is awesome, which is why I think it's just so great having our conversation today to be able to share your energy with the world.
Well, I appreciate that. I think we're kindred spirits because I know your extreme sports are pretty impressive, I would say, with your cycling. That's wonderful.
It's just a couple of pedals and a couple of wheels, and I just look for
Um,
hills to go down. The problem is I got to get up to the top of it first.
like, oh, pshaw.
Well, thank you so much. Take good care. I'll put your contact information down in the show notes below, and maybe we'll check in with you down the road and see what's cooking down there.
That sounds fantastic. I would love to report back a year from now, after competing on my year 70 stage.
Awesome, and I'll put a few photos in as we're going through here too. So
Okay.
wonderful. Okay, thanks so much. Take good care.
Thank you. You too.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Great to have you along with us. Your feedback is always welcome. Feel free to subscribe on your podcast to find out when new shows come out. If you'd like to be part of the WellSpan community, you can also get our quarterly newsletter at wellspan.com. Or if you're interested in being a guest, that's a good place to reach us as well. And if you're interested in talks or appearances, please let us know at wellspan.com and we'll be happy to speak to you about that. Until next time, my friends, take good care of you and those you love.